Chris here, another quick tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our look at using the contrast paint system to paint space marines and various other effects. This video, we're going to take a look at painting white scars. The model has been sprayed using Gray Sear spray paint from Citadel, and we're going to use Apothecary White. Of course, this is applied once the model is completely dry. We're going to use a shade brush here to apply the color. And as you can see, we're going to get a fairly generous amount onto our brush and begin laying this down. Of course, you don't need to really soak in the details of the model as you work with this contrast paint. If you find that it's heavily saturated in area, you just simply pull it off with your brush. Just simply clean it off and just draw the excess out. You can see that there was one point on that helmet there. It was pretty excessive. But again, that's pretty much how this paint system kind of works. It really, you apply it fairly heavily. It crawls into the recesses and nooks and crannies of a model, and it brings out all those little shadowy points as well as tinting the overall surface. Again, you can see it's pretty straightforward. We're just simply going to apply this paint pretty much everywhere. Again, you would think that because this Apothecary White is really kind of just a light gray, that it really wouldn't show up on this Gray Sear spray paint. But once it's dry, you can see how it really does work quite well at falling into all the little details and really kind of bringing out the texture of the model, as it were, all the little doodads and panel lines and things of that nature. And so you can see how you can pretty much just go with that. If you had a whole bunch of these guys to do, you can pretty much just go with that and keep on going. Or you can grab some Praxetti White. This is the Citadel Dry. You can pretty much use white scar as well. Doesn't really matter. Using a small dry brush, and very, very lightly, we are going to dry brush against the grain of the model here. So we're going to just bring out some of these corners, textures, and details of the model. You can see I'm just basically looking to catch just the panel lines and such. And so this is just another way of really bringing out the details of the model after you've used the contrast paint to basically get you pretty much 70% of the way there, really, and just a light little dry brush. And once we're all the way through, you'll see how it's a fairly convincing result, especially for how little time we really spend on the model. Of course, you could always nitpick and, really bring out color transitions and things of that nature. But when you have like 500 of these guys to do, this kind of system here, I think is really beneficial for anybody in that kind of scenario. And so you can see we just simply move around very lightly. We're not applying this too heavily. I get a little aggressive a couple points here on the knee and I think on the side of his helmet as well. And so to correct those kinds of boo-boos, you can simply come back with some Apothecary White and simply just thin it out just ever so slightly with a bit of contrast medium, and then just reapply it onto those areas. You can see on the side of his head there is a little streak where I didn't wipe off enough of the paint from the dry brush. So I just simply lay a little bit of the Apothecary White onto my palette, grab a little bit of the thinning medium. This is the Contrast Technical Thinning Medium. Apply it to it and grab a detail brush and begin just kind of simply re-layering it on top. And again, it pulls that color down. And you could pretty much do this at any point really on the model if there wasn't enough shadow or anything like that, say on the shoulder pads or even these kneecaps. You could see how there was just a little bit of uneven dry brushing there. So I end up pushing the darker tone towards the bottom of the knee. And here I'm just applying another little layer once that area has dried, and begin just kind of camouflaging in that boo-boo. Of course, with white scars, I guess I could have also used the red to camouflage that little boo-boo as well. But either way, you can see how it just pretty much just covers that up and, covers up any of the little boo-boos. Contrast Blood Angels Red is next. This is for all the little red bits around the model. So for the shoulder pads, then elbow pads, any of the little red details around the model. When applying this, I am using a more detailed brush for this roll. So I'm simply going around, trying to be as careful as possible. As you can see, I kind of go a little bit outside of some areas, but that's okay because, if you had like 500 of these guys do, tiny little boo-boos like that aren't really going to stand out amongst the greater whole of it all. As I was doing the chest eagle here, I actually ended up knocking into the collar of the model. And so I was a little bit concerned about that, but I figured, you know what, I'll show you guys how to correct that as well. I'm using the Blood Angels Red here, right out of the pot, no thinning, and I'm basically doing a little bit of freehanding for the little designs that you could apply to the rest of the model. And this pretty much goes for any of the colors in the range. You can simply just use them and begin freehanding and all those kind of things. And you know, it's pretty handy stuff. Again, it flows really thin, but has the nice rich pigment like an ink. And so you can do pretty much whatever you are used to doing in regards to those kinds of inks and, you know, using things of that nature. One side note you'll notice as we progress through this video is that I forgot to highlight the red, but I like the red, and so it was okay. We're using the Black Templar. This is going to be obviously for the gun and the little elbow joins and things of that nature. You know, the little texture that's in the in behind the knees and things of that. So here I'm just using it straight out of the pot. Again, you know, pretty straightforward. We're just going to begin carefully applying it to the model. Now with this stuff, you do want to be careful as you are working your way around the model because, again, because it's so dark and so saturated that you just really don't want to be making any kind of little boo-boos with this stuff because, well, to cover it up is just a little bit of work. And if you are trying to really kind of work your way through these models, you know, these kind of things can really slow you down. Here I'm using a detail brush to apply it into the elbow sections as well as the engine nozzles on the backpack as well. Oh, and I think I did the little hoses on his helmet as well. So you can see, oh, and the grip of the pistol on his belt as well. I did that as well. Just for completeness sake, just for everybody out there who's going, Chris, you didn't paint the pistol. Well, there's probably a lot of things I forgot to paint, but either way, you can see again, it's just pretty straightforward, and I'm not even going to bother touching these little details. I think the black works great in those instances where you want to have that really dark crease in there and have just a little bit of higher color above. You can see I did the cabling on his backpack and his nozzles. You can see they were still a little bit wet, but otherwise, you know, pretty easy. Wildwood is next. This is going to be for the leather pouches and his holster and things of that nature. Basically, we're just going to do one application onto the model. I'm not even going to bother highlighting this because, you know, the details are really small. And this stuff really does work well in these instances where I quickly want to get through painting one of these little sections and just kind of move on with the rest of the model. Pretty much where you really want to be concentrating on models really is like, you know, the large portion. And if you're not doing it for competition stands or anything like that, you just want to just, you know, knock out 500 of these guys. This is really, you know, fantastic. So you can see here, I had that hit that collar with the red very quickly. I had used a damp brush to pull off most of that color, and so it just kind of faded it a bit, but otherwise I want to get rid of that. So I'm simply going to use Gray Sear base paint and apply it right on top of that area. I am going to apply 2 layers onto here because just, you know, because I had thinned it down just with the dampness of the brush, but otherwise I applied 2 layers. And I also cleaned up the knee pad as well, the design on his knee pad. You can see there, I just sharpened up some of those edges and, you know, just brought it a little bit more, make it a little prettier. But again, I completely forgot about doing the red, so I wasn't, you know, I wasn't too worried about it, but, you know, you'll have to forgive me in that instance. We're going with Flesh Terror's red. And this is for the eyeballs. We're using our detail brush here just to simply apply this color into there. And I think it really does a fun job of doing the lenses, as it gives you a little bit of high points, gives you some deepness around the edges, giving you a bit of a 3-dimensionality in the lenses. I think it's really fantastic. Next is a regular old lead belcher. This is a base paint. We just slap it a little bit onto our palette, just the dampness of the brush, just to thin it out a little bit. And of course, I'm basically applying this in sort of an overbrush method. So the paint is saturated into the bristles, but I'm drawing it across the model almost like I would be if I was dry brushing. So I'm just looking to catch just the high points with this brush stroke. And really what I'm doing is, so I'm leaving that black in the recesses so I don't have to come in and try and dry brush this or anything like that nature or what have you. So it's just a really quick kind of way to get through and, you know, use these contrast paints to your advantage, especially if you were just going to go within metallics rather than trying to lay the metallics down and then have the contrast possibly, you know, matte the finish. But there it is. That's a white scar painted with contrast mostly. Let me know what you guys think, and for more videos, join the MiniWarGaming Vault. Be sure to sign up for a silver membership. You can try it for 7 days for free, but be sure to get the silver. Thank you for watching. Happy wargaming.